Hi, welcome back. Here we are today with a presentation on from Module 4 on biodiversity. This is particularly focusing on classification. So, which area of the specification we're looking at today? Well, we're going to focus in particular on the biological classification of a species, what we call taxonomic hierarchy, what those different sections are, and then the binomial system of naming species and why we use that. So, the biological classification of species. What is classification, first of all? Classification is arranging things in groups based on similarities or shared features. And we usually do this what we call hierarchically or in a hierarchy. In other words, from a very big group to smaller and smaller and smaller groups. And taxonomy is a type of classifying that focuses particularly on the physical similarities that you can see, because often that's what you get to do out in the field. If you're out in a particular area looking at something, you're basing it on appearances. You can't necessarily do chemical and genetic tests to tell whether something is closely related or not. And our principal system of taxonomy is Linnaean taxonomy, and it's named after Carl Linnaeus. Here he is in his very dandy wig. He is the father of sort of, if you like, of classification. Prior to that, classification wasn't particularly organized, and many classification names would have 7 or 8 or 10 Latin names, so it would be quite a long description. He reasoned that actually a good classification system should have a short, sort of punchy name that could easily be communicated. And he used features to try and classify them together. And it's still the basis of the system that we use today, and that system is the binomial system. Remembering that binomial literally means 2 names, nomial name. And it's mostly based on Latin. There is some Greek in there as well, a little bit, but it's used in Latin. Why do we use Latin, even though it's no longer a sort of like a current language? It's because it was the language used by all scientists to communicate with each other back in the sort of the 16th, 17th, 18th century. They would write and communicate in Latin. And it does allow us to use a common language internationally. So everybody across the world uses the same names to be able to communicate with each other about the same organisms, even though the common name might be different. This, believe it or not, is a robin because it has a red breast. It's not the same robin as in the UK, but the species are called robins because they have a red chest. Completely unrelated bird species. So we use the sort of the binomial name to allow us to communicate with each other and be able to say this is this particular organism. And here's a classic example of binomial naming: Panthera tigris, the tiger. Now notice when it's been written in italics here. Yeah, so if it's written in computer text, we always use italics. If you're going to write this in your handwriting, you would write it normally, but underline it. So the underlining indicates that you understand that this is a Latin name. First name of the genus always with a capital letter also, so capital letter here, and then the rest all in lowercase, even the species name. So don't put a capital letter here, but do put a capital letter here. The genus, these are sort of a bigger group, which things, so for example, the genus Panthera is big cats, so lions, leopards, tigers are all in that same genus. The species name is a specific group of animals, so it's never used on its own. We use Panthera tigris to refer to the tiger. We don't just call it tigris. Species. Now or you should have looked at species as part of your GCSE. It's in the core science curriculum. What is a species? And it's a group of similar organisms that have certain features in common. And often we talk about members of the same species being able to interbreed. In other words, breed with each other to give fertile offspring. Children that themselves can have children. And we also look at sort of similarities between their anatomy, their appearance, and we'll mention biochemical similarities, but we're not going to go into any detail about those today. So kind of evidence we might use: anatomical, embryological, behavioral, biochemical, and immunological. We'll look at anatomical, embryological, and behavioral today. Anatomy, in other words, the structures that you can see, the body shapes, things which are similar, we are called homologies or homologous structures. In other words, structures that are thought to be related. And there are some examples of those, which again you should be familiar with from GCSE, the pentadactyl limb, the five-fingered limb, we'll look at those in a second. So homologous structures that are related are the pentadactyl limb. Other examples of anatomical evidence, the opposable thumb. So in other words, the fact that you can do that, you can close up your thumb and hold, let me reach for one, a pen in between it, is a particular feature of certain organisms. Yeah. The idea that your brain size is another piece of anatomical evidence. So here's our pentadactyl limbs. Despite the fact that these are widely different groups, human, the horse, the cat, the whale, the bat, the bird, these all have sort of features which you can see are sort of derived from the same original plan. And here's some of more of our evidence that things might be related. We can look at brain size and sort of arrangement of features in the skull to look at how the organisms are related to each other. Now, we've talked about analogous features. It's important to think about the fact that some things might develop to do the same thing, but which are not analogous or homologous, but they are analogous rather. So in other words, they both do the same job, but they are not related to each other. So the insect wing and the bird wing and the bat wing, well, the insect and these three are analogous, but they are, because they do the same thing, but they are not related. So remember that just because insects have wings does not mean they are related to birds, which also have wings. They've just evolved in a different way to do the same function. And there are a number of examples of that. The eye in the octopus and the human, for example. They've evolved to perform in a similar way, but they have evolved from different common ancestors. So therefore, they're not homologous structures that are related to each other. They're analogous structures that have evolved in a certain way to solve a problem, if you like. Embryology, looking at embryos over a period of time, and the closer the embryo matches, then the more likely an organism is to be related. Let's look at an example. Up here, we've got the primary stages of early stages of development for a number of organisms, and this is how they evolve further. Now, all of these are mammalian embryos or mammal embryos, and they look really similar at this stage, and they look pretty similar at this stage. They've got you can just see the limb buds starting to form. The head is similar. Yet as we go on to a later stage of evolution, you can see the difference. So the further something is away from us, the less likely the embryo is to look similar over a period of time. But a long time ago, if you like, everything had a similar evolutionary history. So the embryos look similar or appear similar because they come from similar backgrounds. Behavioral evidence. We can use behavioral similarities to classify things. We are classed as primates, and in common with our primate cousins, we give our offspring a long period of care. We live in social groups. We vocalize, which make noises that others in our groups can recognize, and have facial expressions that others in our groups can recognize. Now, it's not to say that the facial expressions across all primates are the same. This is a broad smile in humans. I wouldn't never do that to a chimpanzee. They won't like it. So, classifying in a hierarchy. The organisms are getting more and more and more similar as you move down, but you're getting, therefore, less and less and less organisms as you go down. So kingdoms are a very large group that have a few similarities. Species, a much smaller group with lots of similarities. and there is a grouping above that called the domain, but we're not going to focus on that today. We'll talk about that in our next presentation. Let's just quickly rattle through a couple of things. Let's think about the kingdom, the eukaryotes or eukarya. Well, there are four main kingdoms that you need to be aware of: Animalia, animals; Plantae, plant; fungi, fungus; and protists or Protoctista. The phylum, the main phylum you need to be aware of is the chordata, the chordates, in other words, things that have a spinal cord that runs down the middle of them. Class, our class is mammals or mammalia, things that feed their young on milk. And within that, our order is primate. So the primates include apes and monkeys, as well as lemurs. The family that we are in is the hominidae, easy for me to say. The hominids are great apes, so gorillas, orangutans, humans, chimpanzees, all have similar features. Genus is a much smaller group, and the only existing member of our genus is us, the Homo sapiens. So even though we are a species, the only surviving member of our genus is the Homo sapiens. There have been previous other examples of our genus, Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthal man, but they no longer survive. So we're the only surviving member of our species. And how do we remember the order for what to put things in? Well, here's one of the ways you can remember it. King, prawn, curry, or fat, greasy sausages. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. The one I learned at school was KP crisps, only from good spuds. KP crisp purveyors of hula hoops, for example. So, but again, whatever floats your boat, whichever way you can remember it, have a mnemonic to help you to remember those things in that particular order. So the key sort of ones you need to be able to think about classifying is humans. That's really where you need to be able to be recognizing. So you need to recognize this terminology of chordata, things with backbones or spinal cord; mammals or mammalia with hairy skin; primates; hominidae, human-like; Homo sapiens, and again notice written in italics to show that it's a particular species. Another example is cats. You don't need to necessarily remember this. You need to remember these in this order. You need to know chordata. You need to know mammalia, but these are pretty common things. Carnivora, things that only eat meat. Cats only eat meat. Felidae, cat-like; Felis, small cats, not big cats; and Felis catus, the domestic cats. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with an exercise to have a go at. Here is a classification for humans that you could have a go at completing. The keywords are at the top. See if you can match up the keywords as to where they belong. And good luck with that, and see you again next time. Bye now.